willed to do something else, say if I had willed to wear a yellow shirt or a green shirt instead of a blue shirt this morning, that act of will alone could cause me to choose to wear a different shirt. So that's what the libertarian view of free will says, that your will, in some cases, is an uncaused cause of your actions. But if indeterminism were true, then your actions would just, at least some of them, would occur by random chance. Your actions wouldn't be caused by your will. It would just be a random event, and that is not what is needed in order to save the thesis that we sometimes act with free will. All right, so I've been presenting a pretty grim picture for libertarianism. You might be worried about, is there any evidence for this view? I mean, it seems intuitive that people do have free will in the libertarian sense. I mean, when you imagine, the things, well, when you think of the things that you've done in your lives, and the things that you will do, and the decisions you have made and will make, okay, all those decisions seem so voluntary, so under your control. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. How could that be an illusion? Well, here's an argument that's intended to prove that indeed libertarianism is true, that we do have free will, at least some of the time. And this argument appeals to the notion of moral responsibility. This argument points out that we are morally responsible for at least some of our actions. And what that means is that when people choose to act, say, in an immoral way, say when people choose to rape or murder or steal, they deserve blame and punishment. They deserve that. On the other hand, sometimes when people choose to act in a moral way, when they help others, when they are honest in their dealings with friends, when they're brave in the face of adversity and so on, when they struggle against injustice, it seems that when people act that way, they deserve praise and reward. This is what it means for somebody to be morally responsible for their actions. If they do something wrong, they deserve punishment and blame. When they do something morally right, they deserve praise and reward. So that argument begins by saying we're morally responsible for at least some of our actions. The next step in the argument says that if we're morally responsible for some of our actions, then we have free will. We must have free will if we're morally responsible for some of our actions. Because just imagine what the implications for moral responsibility would be if we lacked free will. If we lacked free will, we couldn't be responsible for our actions because we wouldn't be able to act differently than we actually do. When we blame a murderer for murdering somebody, how do we justify ourselves in blaming that person? How do we justify ourselves in throwing that person in prison? We say, well, you murderer could have done something else. Okay? You could have refrained from murdering this person. You could have refrained from being so malicious. And because you chose to murder, because you chose to do something wrong, okay, you are the source of that choice, and you should be blamed and punished for making that choice. But what if that's in fact false? What if in fact nobody has free will and everybody's choices are the only choices that they can make? Okay? Everyone's actual choices are the only choices that they're capable of making. Well, then we can't say to anybody, you're responsible for your choices because you could always make the right choice instead of the wrong choice. That's not true if determinism were true. If determinism were true, if someone makes the wrong choice, that's the only choice they could have made. They couldn't have decided to do the right thing instead. And if someone makes the right choice, that's the only decision they could have made. They couldn't have decided to do the wrong thing instead. So if determinism is true, it doesn't seem to make sense that anybody deserves any kind of praise or blame or punishment or reward. So the second step of this argument tells us that if we're morally responsible for our actions, and indeed we are, that was the first step of the argument, then we have free will. Now what do determinists say in response to this? You might be surprised, but they actually will deny the first premise of the argument, and they'll say it's not true that we're morally responsible for our actions. We're not responsible for any of our actions, in fact. No one deserves praise or blame. No one deserves punishment or reward. For precisely the reason that nobody could do other than they do. And some determinists will go further, and they'll argue that because nobody is morally responsible for their choices and their actions, the justice system should be reformed. The criminal justice system should be reformed. Okay? It shouldn't treat rapists and murderers and thieves as people who are deserving of punishment because nobody is deserving of punishment. Society shouldn't demand payback from criminals because they chose to do something wrong. Those criminals couldn't have chosen to do anything else. To punish a criminal and to demand payback would be like demanding that we hate an animal that has escaped from the zoo and is threatening people rather than just stop it. Or in addition to just stopping. Now, determinists accept that, of course, we should do what's necessary to deter criminals from committing crimes. We should stop them and prevent them from causing harm through their crimes. But they also insist that we should treat criminals, even the most heinous criminals, humanely, and do what we can to rehabilitate them. Because, in the end, they're not morally responsible for their choices. They're just products of the history of the universe, every bit as much as you and I are. And they shouldn't be blamed for that. All right, so that's the conclusion of my small talk on free will. The purpose of this was to pique your interest in a potential GP topic, so I hope I've done that. If you'd like to consult with me more about some sources on free will, I'm happy to provide them. But wait, I'm not done though. Yeah, we're going to have a Q&A though, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. But before we get to the Q&A, I just wanted to make a little bit of a shameless plug for my Paymaster NTU philosophy program. Okay. Well, if you do anything related to free will for your general paper, you'll be studying philosophy. And if you do that, well, I applaud you. Because I think there are many good reasons to study philosophy, especially here at NTU. So I'll just share with you 3 reasons that are excellent reasons to study philosophy. One is that philosophy is its own reward. The second is that philosophy is the ideal springboard degree. And the third is that employers are actually looking for people with the skills that the study of philosophy can strengthen and develop in you. So let me briefly explain. Why is philosophy its own reward? This to me is just by far the best reason to study philosophy. But philosophy is its own reward because the questions studied in philosophy are intrinsically interesting. I have asked philosophical questions my entire life. As far back as I can remember, I have asked questions that have been studied by philosophers for thousands of years, throughout history, throughout the world. Inquiring minds have been asking very much the same questions. And since I was very young, and I think you might be able to relate, I asked the same questions too. So these are the kinds of questions that philosophers consider. One that we discussed today was, do we have free will? But there are other questions. Does God exist is another question, okay, that philosophers are very interested in. What are the foundations of ethics and morality? That's a question close to my heart. What is knowledge and what are its limits? Another question that no philosopher can ignore. These are all incredibly just fascinating questions. And I just can't imagine a fulfilling life without asking them and without exploring well-reasoned answers to them. So that's, I think, the best reason to study philosophy, by far. But there are others, if you're not so curious. I don't know. Another reason would be that philosophy is an excellent springboard degree. If you get a degree in philosophy, you potentially could go into just about any field. So there are people trained in philosophy who have entered fields as diverse as teaching, medicine, law, computer science, management, publishing, sales, criminal justice, public relations. Okay. With a degree in philosophy, people have gone into all of these fields. So there's plenty of opportunity awaiting you if you decide to pursue a degree in philosophy. Another reason that philosophy is an ideal springboard degree is that philosophers are trained in such a way that makes them incredibly gifted when it comes to standardized tests, especially those standardized tests that get people into graduate schools and law schools where they can attain an advanced degree. So philosophers, for instance, have dominated the verbal and analytical writing sections of the GRE. These are results from 2011 to 2013, and philosophy is topped. Philosophy graduates have topped the scores in both the verbal and analytical writing sections. And even though maybe they could have done better in the quantitative, they're the best among the humanities, you might notice. And even better than political science. You would expect political scientists to have a little bit more training in quantitative techniques. This is results from the LSAT. That's the standardized test that's required for entrance into law school. And again, philosophy graduates score the best on that test. The GMAT is the standardized test that's an entrance requirement for business school. And philosophers, again, do very, very well. They're outscored only by physics and math majors. But surprisingly, they outscore engineering majors, economics majors, psychology majors. It's quite surprising that economics majors would do worse than philosophers on a business school test. That's weird. I don't think it's that weird, actually, but other people are surprised. I don't think it's weird at all, because philosophers are trained to think analytically and logically. And this provides excellent preparation for entrance exams into graduate schools and ultimately the pursuit of an advanced degree later on. All right, one last point about why you should study philosophy. The philosophy education will develop in you skills that employers value and want in their employees. So what skills are those? They include skills like how to think logically, critically, and independently. Independently, that's a great addition. Employers don't want people who are just yes people, who just kind of, do what they're told. They want people who can think creatively, think out of the box, recognize new solutions to problems, and innovate. And philosophers are rewarded for doing exactly that. They're rewarded for solving problems and thinking of new ways, okay, to approach problems. Communicating ideas and arguments clearly and persuasively is another thing that philosophers cannot survive without doing. You cannot survive in a philosophy class without writing a clear essay. You might write beautifully, you might write like just wonderful poetry, but you would still get an F in my class because you don't write clearly and persuasively. Not an F, but, well, maybe a B. But an F is quite possible even if you write with beautiful poetry. Finally, another skill that philosophers are quite adept at is that they can reason with abstract concepts and apply those concepts to particular cases. So the other day in my class, we were talking about capital punishment. And I asked students, well, why is it justified, if it is justified at all, to kill a murderer? And then one student in the class pointed out, well, you know, a lot of people kind of get satisfaction out of that. You know, they see a murderer get killed, okay? Yeah, you know. That's quite satisfying. So, you know, if we want to maximize the amount of satisfaction that people in society have, why not kill murderers? And then another student said, wait a minute, okay, well, if that's a good justification for killing people, why do we have to restrict it just to murderers? Why don't we just apply it to everybody? Why don't we just apply it to people who haven't done anything? Okay? Well, what about religious minorities that just happen to be hated, or homosexuals? Okay, if enough people are satisfied enough by killing a certain group of people, whether they did anything wrong or not, then should we do it? Would that be justified? Oh wait, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe just satisfying people isn't a good enough reason to kill someone. So that's the kind of skill that you'll develop in philosophy. You'll be able to take an abstract concept, okay, like the idea that killing people to satisfy others is justified, and apply it to many different situations and see whether or not that concept or that idea is in fact defensible, is in fact very plausible. So that's what we constantly do in philosophy. Is it really true that employers want these skills? Yes, indeed it is. So there was a recent survey of executives from 428 of the United States' largest corporations. And this survey was conducted by Michigan State University. And the executives ranked factors such as ability to get things done, writing skills, initiative, and dependability significantly higher than the applicant's academic major. Look at that quote. Okay. Writing skills. Okay. Writing skills and, well, initiative. Okay. Of course, I just mentioned to you that philosophers are good writers. They have to be. Okay. And, well, initiative is kind of creativity and innovativeness. Okay. Well, philosophers have to be innovative in their thinking. Here's some data from another survey. This is a survey by the American Association of Colleges and Universities, which sponsored a survey of over 100 business and government executives. These are owners, CEOs, presidents, and vice presidents. And in this survey, employers were asked what skills they thought were vital for their employees to have. The survey also asked whether employees thought that universities were successful in teaching those skills to recent graduates. So here's one item in the survey, which shows the proportion of employers who say colleges should place more emphasis than they do today on selective learning outcomes. Okay? So employers in this survey are saying more emphasis needs to be made in teaching the following skills to university undergraduates. And what tops the list? Ability to effectively communicate orally and in writing. Critical thinking and analytical reasoning skills. The ability to apply knowledge and skills to real-world settings through internships and other hands-on experiences. the ability to analyze and solve complex problems, and the ability to connect choices and actions to ethical decisions. A philosophy curriculum is exactly the kind of curriculum that challenges students to develop those skills. You just saw the test scores, okay, where philosophers are outscoring students in other majors in analytical reasoning skills and verbal skills. Okay. Philosophers, again, are quite adept in writing. And when it comes to ethical decision making, well, you can't get any more training in ethical thinking than in a philosophy major. In a philosophy major, you'll have at least 2 or 3 courses in ethics. So that's another consideration. Employers want the skills that philosophers have. So why don't you give them to those employers? Why don't you offer them and see how things go? This is a concern that comes up a lot often. And people approach philosophy with a certain amount of suspicion, thinking, but can I make any money off of a philosophy degree? Well, the answer is yes, you can, actually. If you're so concerned about your financial prospects, okay, after you graduate, okay, that concern isn't a reason against studying philosophy. It's not a reason to not be a philosophy major. Why is that? Well, here's some statistics from the United States in 2013. The median annual salary of starting career philosophy graduates without higher degrees, that's just philosophy graduates from universities with only bachelor degrees, no master's, law degrees, PhD, nothing like that. The starting careers, the median annual salary of starting career philosophy graduates was $39,700 US. And then, when it came to mid-career annual salary, for the same population, philosophy graduates without higher degrees, that grew to $78,300 US, so almost a 98% increase from the starting to mid-career median salary. So how does philosophy compare with people who have degrees in other kinds of majors? Okay. These are non-graduate degrees. Well, it puts philosophy at number 1 among all the humanities, and indeed above several science majors like biology and psychology, and even more surprisingly, above so-called professional majors. These are majors that are supposed to get you into a profession.